The Burning Crusade. We've heard its name or title before, but what was it? Or rather, what is it? To know that, we need to understand what exactly happened to a Titan named Sargeras. The Pantheon left Azeroth in hands of the Keepers, and continued their journey into the Great Beyond in search for more world souls. Now, we know that Sargeras had broken all ties with the Pantheon, because after learning about the Void Lords and their plans, his new mission was to purge the entire universe of all life. Seeing creation itself as fatally flawed, he pursued the chance for a complete restart. And this is where the Burning Crusade would begin. In order to accomplish this task, Sargeras would need a massive army. But where could one find the numbers for this war machine? Well, he already had it. Sargeras would use the countless amount of demons that he had imprisoned in the plane of banishment called Mardoom. Over time, this prison had become bloated with fell magic and vengeful demons. Even their presence warped Mardoom, transforming it into a realm of nightmares. Fell energy constantly bombarded the prison walls, bathing the captive demons in a sea of volatile magic. So it's safe to say that these demons were enraged, and that's exactly what Sargeras was looking for. He tore the prison asunder, spilling the wrathful denizens into the great dark beyond. But by doing this, a burst of fell magic accompanied his actions, much more violent than the soon-to-be corrupted Titan had imagined. Fell energies enveloped Sargeras, surging through his veins and searing his soul. His eyes burst in gouts of emerald fire. Fell volcanoes ignited across his once noble form, splitting his skin apart and revealing an endless furnace of blistering hate. But despite these changes, his mind remained focused on his all-consuming purpose: to prevent the Void Lords from possessing creation. And in order to do that, he felt that life had to be extinguished. Shattering Mardoom not only let loose the demons that he had himself imprisoned there, but it also ruptured the boundary between the Great Beyond and the Twisting Nether. This would be in the form of a celestial maw, a scar on creation, limbed in a storm of emerald fire. It would remain as proof of Sargeras' madness for all eternity. Demons of every shape poured into the physical universe from this rift, while Sargeras imbued the masses with his power, uniting them as one in an inferno of fell magic. Even though some of the demons had already tapped into the fell energies before, they had never experienced the power that was granted to them by the corrupt Titan. This was new. So new that some of the creatures grew in size and stature. But why would the demons even consider abiding by Sargeras' rules, or even choose to fight for his cause? Well, by this point, Sargeras knew a lot about the nature of demons. But more importantly, he knew how to permanently destroy their spirits. So the pact was this: in exchange for the demons' newfound power, they would fight for Sargeras, or be extinguished. It really wasn't a difficult choice to make. And thus, Sargeras unleashed his new army, the Burning Legion. This mass force would now invade an innumerable number of worlds that populated the Great Dark. Never had the forces of evil been united in such quantity, and Sargeras wielded enough power to make disobedience all but unthinkable. Nobody was going to challenge him. But more importantly, his minions took great delight in their role as agents of extinction. The Burning Legion fell upon its first world. Even though it didn't contain a sleeping Titan, it was still a world that had been ordered by the Pantheon in ages past. Similar, if not exactly the same way that Azeroth was ordered just a short while ago. Sargeras' forces incinerated the mortal civilizations that lived there, wiping out dozens of sentient species. When the Constellar that was charged to this world arrived to handle the situation, Sargeras annihilated the celestial being. Now, turning our attention to the Pantheon, Agrimar was the first to learn about the Constellar's death. As news of the Burning Legion's atrocities reached him, he hunted down the demonic army. Unfortunately, Agrimar arrived just in time to witness the Legion destroy yet another world. This would be the first time that he would see his mentor and greatest friend, Sargeras, now in his twisted and fire-wreathed form. He demanded an explanation from Sargeras, who offered none, only declaring that his Burning Crusade was the sole means to purify the universe, and that anyone who stood against him would burn in the fires of his legion as well. Needless to say, this conversation didn't last long. Agrimar quickly knew that nothing was going to sway Sargeras to abandon his cause, so he challenged his former mentor to single combat. And thus, the two greatest warriors the universe had ever known came to blows. Agrimar was outmatched. Like all Titans, he was uniquely susceptible to fell magic, and Sargeras' assaults shattered Agrimar's defenses. In a final desperate counterattack, Agrimar summoned all the power at his command and struck at Sargeras. Their two blades met, igniting an explosion of fell and arcane power, leading to both of their weapons becoming shattered. Retreating from the battle, Agrimar returned to the Pantheon. Disbelief gripped the other Titans as they learned what had happened. Knowing that Sargeras had fallen to darkness shook their faith to the core. Not knowing how to stop this new threat, the Pantheon acknowledged that they could not sit idle, and decided that action was needed. Geared for war, the Pantheon confronted Sargeras and his army near the world of Nihilem. Aman'Thul called out to Sargeras one final plea to abandon this burning crusade. Adding on to this, he informed him of Azeroth, and how the world's soul on the newly ordered planet had more potential than any of the Pantheon had ever seen. A Titan strong enough to defeat the Void Lords in due time. Even though Sargeras listened carefully, he still wasn't moved. Despite his earlier battle with Sargeras, Agrimar still believed that something noble was still lingering deep in the former champion's heart. Laying down his arms, he approached the fallen Titan and recounted the tales of their glorious battles against demons, reminding Sargeras of the sacred oath they had sworn to protect creation. Set in his ways, Sargeras dismissed anything the Pantheon said. With a howl of rage and sorrow, Sargeras struck Agrimar down, nearly cleaving the Titan in two. Infuriated by this murder, the Pantheon launched an all-out assault on Sargeras and his Burning Legion. Stars withered and died as the battle raged across the cosmos. So grand was this fight that it's almost unfathomable for the human mind. Nihilem, known thereafter as the Doom World, became warped and twisted by the conflict. And despite the Pantheon's powers, they still could not overcome Sargeras' fel-fueled might. The fallen Titan decimated the Pantheon members with fel fire, until they had lost their will to continue combating. And to seal their demise, Sargeras summoned a massive fel storm that would consume not only their bodies, but their souls alike. Just as the furious onslaught of energy washed over the defeated Titans, Norgannon made one last attempt to stave off oblivion. He bent the raw energies of the universe to his will, creating protective shrouds around the spirits of the Pantheon members, launching them into the Great Dark. And while their souls hurtled through the cosmos, Sargeras obliterated what remained of their physical forms. Unaware that the Titans' spirits had survived, Sargeras declared the Burning Legion victorious. The Pantheon was no more, and he now had some small knowledge of this new world called Azeroth. Not knowing its location, and with the Pantheon no longer in his way, he knew that it would only be a matter of time before he would find it. And more importantly, he knew that he had to find it before the Void Lords did. With the Burning Legion triumphant over the Pantheon, Sargeras moved to rally even more demons to his cause. The fight with the Pantheon exposed a flaw in his army, one that he needed to remedy quickly. Even though Sargeras was powerful beyond all reason, he couldn't direct his entire army at once. Demons were vicious and bloodthirsty, but most lacked strategic thinking. The Legion had needlessly lost many of their ranks to the Pantheon. With room to fill, Sargeras wanted cunning, tactically minded commanders to join his side, and he had seen a place from which to harvest such servants, a world called Argus. Argus was home to the highly advanced Eredar, a race far more intelligent than any other that Sargeras had encountered. The Eredar hungered for knowledge above all else, believing that with it, they could shape the universe into a better place. The Eredar were ruled by 3 individuals, not by might or fear, but by contemplating the questions of the cosmos and sharing the answers with their people. The first was Archimonde. He had a gift for finding the strengths in those around him. His bold demeanor inspired his followers to face any challenge presented to them. The second was Kil'jaeden, the most brilliant of the 3, and was considered a prodigy even among the gifted Eredar. He reveled in solving the most confounding mysteries of the cosmos. Lastly, there was Velen, the spiritual heart of the leaders, a relentless champion of peace whose wisdom could diffuse any conflict. Individually, each member of the 3 would have made an excellent leader, but it was their combined strengths that elevated their people to undreamed heights. This unity was the ideal solution for the Legion's weaknesses. But in order to conscript them to his cause, Sargeras would need to corrupt them entirely. So, he played to their desires, knowledge, promising them that and unimaginable power. He showed them worlds beyond count that they might hold dominion. Primitive places that the Eredar could transform into sanctuaries of peace and intellectual thought. Sargeras vowed to share with the Eredar not only the most obscure secrets of existence, but also the final answer to what he believed was the fundamental flaw in creation. In return, they would devote themselves to Sargeras' grand work and help him remedy that flaw. Now, there's a bit of lying going on here, that's clear, and maybe more like omission, because Sargeras talks up a good game here. The Eredar help him out, and they get the power and control of a ton of worlds. Now, digging a little deeper and not trying to go off the path here, but in the novel Rise of the Horde, it says, Sargeras had told them, meaning the 3 leaders, that the Eredar were exactly what he had been searching for, a strong, passionate, proud people who would serve him and advance a cause that would bring all worlds, everywhere, together. He would enhance them, he said. He would change them, make them better, give them gifts that the universe had never before seen. For indeed, the universe had never before brought together the powers that Sargeras claimed and the uniqueness that was the Eredar. And what Sargeras had told them would indeed come to pass. So he did leave out a lot of dark details, but let's continue. This offer excited both Archimonde and Kil'jaeden. They both were proud to be part of this grand undertaking, but Velen, he wasn't convinced. Something was off. Sargeras gave off a strange feeling that Velen couldn't shake, and he would later be right to follow his instincts about him. So, Velen began meditating, using an ancient artifact gifted to his race by the Naru long before his time. This item was called the Atamal Crystal. Through this enchanted relic, Velen received a horrific vision of the Eredar's future if they sided with Sargeras. They would definitely be changed, as the corrupt Titan said, changed into horribly disfigured demonic beings of pure evil. Velen warned the other 2 of what he saw, but Archimonde and Kil'jaeden made it clear that they intended to accept Sargeras' offer. This put Velen in a tough situation, because now he feared for his life. The possibility that the other two leaders would kill him if he continued to distance himself from the new plan was very much at the doorstep. That plan being to basically enslave themselves to Sargeras' will. So, in order to stay alive, he faked his acceptance to the whole thing, gave the other two the thumbs up and assured them that he was all in. But now, he feared the fate of his people. And in that moment of desperation, one of the Naru, Kure, contacted the Eredar leader and offered to shepherd him and his closest allies to safety. Filled with hope, Velen sought out other Eredar whom he believed he could trust. As Sargeras arrived on Argus to corrupt the unsuspecting Eredar, Velen and his followers made their daring escape. They gathered aboard a massive Naru dimensional fortress known as the Genedar, abandoning their homeland forever. From that day on, Velen and his followers would be known as the Draenei, or Exiled Ones. Their escape would set Kil'jaeden into an unstoppable rage, vowing never to stop hunting them. Back on Argus, Sargeras bent remaining Eredar to his will. Fel energy surged through the minds of the world's inhabitants, drowning out their ability to reason. The Fel twisted their forms, producing what would only be known as the resemblance of demons. So if you've ever wondered why you've seen Draenei-looking characters with demonic red skin, well, now you know. From here, the Eredar settled into the Burning Legion as commanders. Kil'jaeden and Archimonde would stand as the most gifted and powerful among them. Sargeras molded Kil'jaeden's innate cunning and intellect to suit the Legion's designs. He would be known thereafter as the Deceiver, and would be used to beguile the mortal civilizations of the physical universe, thus setting them on a path to transform and become one with the Burning Legion. Archimonde was used to motivate and strengthen the Burning Crusade, and would be known henceforth as the Defiler. He would use his powerful will to drive the demonic masses to acts of extreme violence and barbarism, making all those who served under him weapons of annihilation. Under the Eredar leadership, the Burning Legion swelled with new demonic races, both from the Twisting Nether and other worlds from the Great Dark. Pit Lords would be conscripted to serve as living siege engines. The Moarg became the Legion's armorers. Succubi infiltrated prospective worlds to gather intel about their civilizations. The Doomguard fought as the Legion's shock troops, and the Shavara became the Legion's mystics and advisors. All of these creatures fostered a fanatical loyalty to Sargeras, as well as bolstered the might of the Burning Legion. Pleased with his forces, Sargeras launched the demons into the Great Dark, renewing his Burning Crusade against life. In the ages to come, the Legion would scour countless other worlds and civilizations from existence. But let's go back a bit and talk about what happened to the Pantheon's souls that were saved. While the Legion was using the Great Dark as their personal playground, the last embers of the Pantheon's power clung to life. Norgannon's last-ditch effort spell worked in saving their souls when Sargeras destroyed their physical forms. And these disembodied Titan spirits hurtled through the Great Dark, straight towards the world of Azeroth and its keepers. There, the Pantheon hoped they could locate physical forms to inhabit. If they couldn't, the Titans feared that their weakened spirits would soon fade into oblivion. Once they reached Azeroth, the depleted spirits slammed into the Keepers, who were immediately overwhelmed as the Titans' powers flared in their minds. In a brief moment, the Keepers would witness fragmented memories of distant worlds, lifetimes never lived, wonders never seen, and just like that, the vision dimmed. Retaining their original personalities, the Keepers puzzled over the strange phenomenon. They clearly knew that they had been gifted with a portion of the Pantheon's power, but were unaware that the last remnants of their beloved makers had been infused in their very bodies. Calling out to their makers, the Keepers looked for answers, only to find silence. This troubled them, and they sank into a period of confusion and unease. Now, these are strong emotions, so strong that the old god Yogg-Saron, who was imprisoned beneath Ulduar, sensed these feelings. And after eons since the ordering of Azeroth, an awareness had begun to stir within the creature. The old god had devised a plan to escape from its jailers by corrupting the Forge of Wills, infecting its creation matrix with a strange malady known as the Curse of Flesh. Any Titan Forge created by the machine thereafter would fall victim to this affliction. Some would even spread this to previous generations of Titan Forged. The Curse of Flesh would transform a number of servants into beings made of flesh and blood, beings that Yogg-Saron could kill. In order for this to work, Loken, one of the keepers, would need to be used. He had been the most troubled by the Pantheon's silence. His emotions ran high, and that's when Yogg-Saron infiltrated his mind through fevered dreams, stoking the cold fires of his despair. Yet, even in his disturbed state, Loken resisted the whisperings in his mind. But regardless, his downfall was imminent. As he drifted deeper and deeper into an emotional state of darkness, he would seek comfort from a Vrykul named Sif, who happened to be the mate of his brother, Thorim. He met with her in private, telling Sif of his darkest fears. In time, the two blossomed a forbidden love for each other. This is all that Yogg-Saron needed. The old god latched onto Loken's love for Sif and twisted it into a dangerous obsession, which in the end quickly soured the relationship. Due to his compulsive behavior, as he talked about openly professing their love for each other, Sif would oppose the idea of having that knowledge out in the open. She knew that if Thorim found out about their affair, it would shatter him to the core. Ultimately, Sif broke off all ties with Loken, and the thought of losing her drove him to madness. In a fit of anger and jealousy, he lashed out and killed her. Racked by guilt, he couldn't bring himself to tell Thorim what had happened, so he scrambled for a way to cover up her death. And that's when her spirit appeared before him. Surprisingly, she forgave him and warned him that he should act quickly before Thorim learned the truth, because if he were to find out, the Titan Forged would turn to civil war, and every pledge that Loken had made to the Pantheon would be broken. This didn't sit well with him. Something was off about Sif's spirit. It was devious, a trait that he never saw in her while she was alive. But regardless of how dark the feeling was, he pushed his doubts away due to his fear, which was clouding his judgment. So, guided by Sif's spirit, Loken dragged her body into the frozen wastes of the Storm Peaks, then informed Thorim about his wife's demise, convincing him that Arngrim, king of the Ice Giants, was to blame. This led Thorim slaying Arngrim and many of his followers, and sparked a war between Thorim's Storm Giants and Arngrim's Ice Giants. All the while, Sif's spirit continued aiding Loken as the conflict raged. Her guidance became more and more extreme, but Loken pushed forward anyways. This is when she convinced him to build an army of his own using the Forge of Wills, an army large enough to protect Ulduar from the threat of the giants. Adding to this, he was convinced to chastise his brother Thorim for even starting this war, and used Sif as a tool, stating that she would look upon him in shame for what he had done in her name. This would throw Thorim into a deep depression, one that would push him to abandon Ulduar and languish in solitude. With Thorim gone, Loken used his newly created army to overthrow the giants, thus ending the conflict. All those who still resisted were locked away in stasis chambers. But during the time as these battles were happening, Loken noticed that his newly created warriors carried some sort of dark affliction upon their spirits. As he reached out to Sif for clarification, he would receive no response. She had gone quiet, leading Loken to realize that her spirit never existed, and that it was an illusion created by Yogg-Saron. Though Loken had not known it, This false spirit had tainted the Forge of Wills while the Keeper was creating his army. The curse of flesh had taken hold in the machine's creation matrix. Loken had been played and used as a pawn. This discovery shattered Loken's heart, and he would become obsessed with keeping his transgressions a secret, even if it meant embracing the power of Yogg-Saron. With such might at his command, he felt confident that he could defeat the remaining Keepers and destroy all evidence of his wrongdoing. Now, in order to defeat the other Keepers, Loken would first need to silence Odin. He had the Valor, which would be a rather difficult obstacle to overcome if attacked head-on. So, he thought of another avenue of approach. He would use Helya and her bitterness towards Odin for making her the way she was, promising her that he would break the chains of servitude that bound her to Odin's will. In exchange, she would seal off the halls of Valor from the world forever. This would transfer the role of caretaker of all the Vrykul spirits to Helya. Now, this wasn't very difficult for her to agree with. But how is it that Loken could simply break her bond with Odin? Chronicles doesn't say. Maybe there's some text elsewhere that talks about his ability to do so. But still, he did it. And Helya called on the same powers that she used to secure the elemental plane ages ago, and bent the latent arcane energies swirling around Azeroth to her command, thus sealing off the halls of Valor and those who dwelt within. Odin and his Valor tried to escape the floating citadel, but they failed to break the barrier that Helya created. Odin and his army would remain trapped within the halls of Valor for ages to come. Helya, now free from her life of servitude, made a new home for herself and the Valkyr. She created an enchanted refuge far below the halls of Valor, binding it to Azeroth's great seas. This place would be known as Helheim, and become the final destination for many Vrykul spirits after death. Not all would join her in Helheim, though. Some would disappear into the Shadowlands, and would watch over the physical world, at times guiding the dead back to the land of the living. As for Helya, the darkness that had festered in her heart transformed Helheim into a place of nightmare and shadow. The Vrykul that arrived there found themselves turned into vengeful, wraith-like beings. These cursed spirits were known as the Kavaldir, and they became one with the ocean mists. They would raid and plunder the shores of Kalimdor for all eternity, driven by their malice and anguish that burned inside of them. With Odin and his army sealed away, Loken was free to continue his downfall of the remaining Keepers. But a new threat was on the horizon. Mimiron had been looking into Loken's new army, and he knew something was off. But before he could dig deeper, Loken infiltrated the Keeper's workshop, killing Mimiron and staging it as if it were some tragic accident. However, he wasn't completely dead. His faithful mechanomes realized that his spirit lived on, and began constructing a giant mechanized body to house the Keeper's soul. Even though the heroic act saved him, Mimiron would never be the same. His brush with death broke his mind, and he secluded himself in Uldurar's vast workshops, focusing on his clockwork inventions. Now, Loken had set the timer on the clock. Soon the rest of the Keepers would know that something was up, and he needed to move fast because anything could be planned against him. He started by confronting Freya at the Temple of Life. The battle raged between the two and their followers. Ultimately, she fell to Loken and the shadowy powers that Yogg-Saron had granted him. More so, the old god seized on Freya's weakened state, compelling her broken spirit to withdraw into the halls of Uldurar, where she would spend her time tending to a garden at the heart of the fortress. While battling Freya, some of Loken's army attacked Hodir at the Temple of Winter. Two fire giants, namely Ignis and Vulcan, led the assault. They encased the temple in an inferno, sapping Hodir's wintry strength and decimating his followers. Loken would arrive later to subdue Hodir with little to no effort. And just like with Freya, Hodir's mind was warped by Yogg-Saron, forcing the Keeper to retreat into the frigid chamber within Uldurar. There, he would remain in seclusion for millennia. Now, Tyr and Arcadis would be the two remaining keepers not to fall victim to the betrayal. Tyr knew that something was up with Loken, only to confirm his suspicions when Hodir was attacked. But Tyr wasn't in any position to confront Loken directly. The fallen keeper's army roamed not only Ulduar, but the whole of Storm Peaks. So, escaping seemed to be the only plan. Tyr took Arcadis and their close friend, a Titan-forged giantess named Ironaya, to the outskirts of Storm Peaks. There they waited and watched Loken's schemes unfold and began planning their next move. While Loken's forces scoured the land for the missing three and ultimately never finding them, Loken asserted sole dominion over Ulduar, altering the machineries within the fortress and using them to anoint himself as the new prime designate of Azeroth. Lastly, he disabled the Forge of Wills, banished a number of servants to the Storm Peaks, and finally sealing off the fortress of Ulduar. Loken languished in regret within Ulduar's silent halls. Despite all that he had accomplished, he feared that the Pantheon or Algalon would return to Azeroth someday. If that were to happen, they would know the events that took place in their absence, thus punishing Loken for his crimes, when in all reality, the greatest threat was beneath Loken's feet all along. No longer under the watchful eyes of Ulduar's jailers, Yogg-Saron began to stir, working to free itself from its impregnable prison. But what about Ra? We know that he remained in the south after the construction of Ahn'Qiraj, so what's his part in all of this? Loken always expected Ra to investigate what had been happening in Ulduar, but surprisingly, the High Keeper stayed silent throughout these world-altering events. And being driven by curiosity, Loken sent a portion of his army to Uldum in order to investigate Ra's activities, but they never found him. Even the local Mogu, Tol'vir, and Anubisas said that he simply vanished. These meetings with the Titan Forge would not only disseminate knowledge, but the curse of flesh from Loken's army would also spread to Ra's servants. Now, concerning Ra, Loken and the Titan Forged didn't know that he had experienced a revelation, a terrible one, so bad that it drove him to seclusion. When the Pantheon's power and memories had been infused in the Keepers, Ra was confused, much like his siblings. Over time, he concluded that this event was more than just an anomaly. The influx of power was the last remnant of the Pantheon's spirits. He struggled with the idea that the Keeper's creators had fallen. What he did next was something that no other Keeper had done. He extracted the lingering power of Aman'Thul from himself, storing it in a mountain vault that would become known as the Veil of Eternal Blossoms. There, the High Keeper hoped to preserve what little was left of his Titan creator. Retreating to the catacombs beneath the land, Ra would meditate on what he had learned. Without his presence, the loyal Titan Forge developed new cultures, very distinct from those of the Northern Kin. Most of the Tol'vir gathered around Uldum, making it their home. The Anubisas continued their charge to watch over the prison of Cthulhu, and the Mogu remained in the east, guarding the vaults and machineries buried beneath the earth. For ages after Loken's betrayal, the exiled Titan Forge from Ulduar spread across northern Kalimdor. Giants made their way into the mountains and seas, disappearing from sight. The Earthen tunneled into the deep places of the world, battling for dominance against misshapen creatures known as the Trogs. But where did they come from? Well, following the war with the old gods, the Keepers created them using the Forge of Wills, obviously, and these Titan Forge were their first design. Not perfect. They were actually a bit too complex and overambitious. The refined version of their next Titan Forge would be the Earthen, and the Keepers were troubled by the Trogs. They were savages, but still, they didn't have the heart to destroy them. So Ironaya built a small subterranean vault called Uldumon. It would act as a stasis chamber for the Trogs. Some escaped imprisonment and wandered the world. Others even found their way into Deepholm. So it is important to mention them specifically because of Uldaman and the importance that happens there. Now, back to the other Titan Forged, the Vrykul. Those that remained above ground congregated into small clans. Some factions wandered as nomads, others established dwellings across the region. For the most part, a sort of peace existed between the different groups of Titan Forged, but as suspected, this wouldn't last for long. In time, two of Loken's creations, the fire giants Vulcan and Ignis, moved to assert dominion over the lands. They saw storm peaks surrounding Ulduar as a land ready for conquest, but in order to seize it, they needed an army. So they turned to the fierce Winterskorn clan of the Vrykul. While many Vrykul were naturally warlike, most avoided direct confrontation with each other, but the Winterskorn proved to be an exception. They had developed a culture of violence and aggression, mainly due to the idea that they would ascend to the halls of Valor one day. No matter who it was, they thrived on conflict. Vulcan and Ignis took control of the Winterskorn by force and stoked the fires of their battle lust. They even equipped the Vrykul with enchanted armor and weapons to shatter the iron and stone skin of the other Titan Forged. And just as they began their journey of conquest, anomalies began to show in the Vrykul. Their metallic skin became brittle and weak. These were the first symptoms from the curse of flesh. But this didn't stop Vulcan and Ignis. To supplement, they created molten golems and iron constructs of their own design. So now, the army marched. First against the Earthen, who were completely unprepared. It was a massacre. Some of the Earthen escaped, fleeing and searching for help from Tyr, Arcadis, and Ironaya, who had thus far eluded Loken's wrath. Learning what had happened, Tyr and his companions immediately journeyed to the Earthen's home. A series of battles ensued, with Tyr leading the Earthen against the Winterskorn, while Arcadis and Ironaya constructed defenses to ward off future attacks. In time, the Winterskorn were driven back. This didn't mean defeat for Vulcan and Ignis. They doubled down, creating enchanted snares to enslave entire flights of proto-dragons, and they would serve not as mounts, but as beasts of war. Now, they were back at it again. The Winterskorn's next brutal assault shattered the Earthen's defenses and drove them from their refuge. Scattered across the mountain passes, the Earthen were hunted by Vrykul and golems, while the proto-dragons attacked from the skies. Even Tyr, Arcadis, and Ironaya were forced to flee. Knowing that they could not defeat the Winterskorn alone, Tyr called upon the 5 dragon aspects to help. Seeing the slain Titan Forged and enslaved proto-dragons set them into a rage, and without hesitation, they unleashed their power onto the Winterskorn ranks. Like they had done with Galakrond, the aspects worked together in unison. Alexstrasza held the Winterskorn at bay with towering walls of fire. Malygos drained the magical essence that fueled the constructs and golems, rendering them useless. He also shattered the enchanted snares that enslaved the proto-dragons, thus setting them free. Neltharion raised mountains to contain the Vrykul and their giant masters. And lastly, Ysera and Nozdormu combined their powers to create a spell that would bring an end to the conflict. They enveloped the Winterskorn in a mist that caused the Titan Forged to fall asleep. Then, the Vrykul were locked away in tuned cities across northern Kalimdor. This wasn't a peaceful sleep of the Emerald Dream, rather an unconscious slumber that would last for thousands upon thousands of years. In the millennia to come, the curse of flesh would continue to progress, and when the Winterskorn awoke, almost every one of them would discover that they had degenerated into mortal creatures of flesh and blood. With the Winterskorn defeated, Tyr looked to deal with Loken. As long as Ulduar remained sealed off and the Titan Forged were divided, conflicts would continue to sprout. If Loken wasn't taken care of, Azeroth would spiral into an abyss of war and chaos. But overthrowing Loken wasn't an overnight event. No, this would take years of preparation. The three, that being Tyr, Arcadis, and Ironia, concluded that they needed to gather intelligence on Loken and what he was doing. So, they decided to steal something that would tell them everything they needed to know: the Discs of Norgannon. And if you remember from the previous video, the Discs of Norgannon were made to record everything that transpired on Azeroth, so that if or when the Pantheon returned, they would have a full record about what happened in their absence. And if that's the case, a recording of everything with Loken and his betrayal would be there. At the time, the Discs were located at the heart of Ulduar, and if there was any hope of undoing the damage that Loken had caused, it would be through careful study of his actions. So, a plan was set, or rather a ruse to claim the Discs. Tyr traveled to the gates of Ulduar, called on Loken to relinquish control of the fortress for the good of Azeroth, threatening dire consequences if he refused. Then, Loken arrived. The two began to argue, exactly as Tyr had hoped. While Loken was distracted, Arcadis and Ironia infiltrated Ulduar and stole the Discs of Norgannon. Once secured, Tyr and his companions escaped back into the ridges of Storm Peaks. Knowing that Loken would hunt them down, they decided to travel south. But before leaving, they gathered a large number of Titan Forged who dwelled around Ulduar. A large group of Vrykul that were afflicted with the Curse of Flesh, most of the surviving Earthen, and even a portion of the Mechanomes. Now, do you see where this is going? If not, we'll get there soon enough. The three saw these Titan Forged as innocent victims of Loken's shenanigans, so they promised them a sanctuary before liberating Ulduar. The refugees traveled for many weeks, believing they had escaped Loken's control. But when Loken learned that the Discs of Norgannon were taken, panic set in. He thought, if Tyr and his allies presented Algalon or the Pantheon with the Discs, his life would be over. Out of sheer desperation, he turned to the only creature he knew that could destroy Tyr and recover the Discs: ancient Cathraxi monstrosities known as Zakaj and Kithix. They served as the Black Empire's most ruthless and cunning generals, but they had been sealed away, along with many other of the Naraki, in underground chambers alongside the old god. Carefully, Loken excavated these tombs and roused the creatures back to life, ordering them to kill Tyr and all who followed him. Sensing the lingering connection of Yogg-Saron in Loken's mind, they obeyed without hesitation. Far to the south, in a tranquil and temperate glade, Zakaj and Kithix overtook the fleeing keepers and their followers. Tyr ordered Arceus and Ironia to lead the Titan Forged farther south, while he stayed and held off the Cathraxi for as long as he could. The battle between Tyr and the raised Black Empire generals raged for 6 days and nights. Neither side gave ground, and as fatigue set in, Tyr realized that sacrifice was needed in order to protect his friends. Unleashing his remaining power on the Cathraxi, he expended his life in a blinding explosion of arcane energy that shook the bones of the world, and then if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video, and if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, please check out my membership options here on YouTube. It does support the work that I'm doing, and you do get early access to the videos when I release them. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time on the Tales of Azeroth.